Hi, Brett Johnson here, former United States most wanted cyber criminal, now good guy, or as the United States Secret Service called me, the original internet godfather. Now, Brett, how did you get that title? Well, I'll tell you how I got that title. 39 felonies because 38 just ain't enough. A place on the United States most wanted list. I escaped from prison. Ha! And I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community. It was called Shadow Crew. It was a precursor to today's darknet markets. It laid the foundation for the way modern cybercrime channels operate today. Those 39 felonies, well, they had to do with refining modern financial cybercrime as we now know it. If you want to point your finger at somebody who's at fault for this bullshit, point it this way. And yes, that shit will get you in prison. Deservedly so. Now look, there's a whole story behind all that we ain't got time for today, because today, right now, it's time for the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, let's talk about account takeovers when we come back. Okay, so we are back to the Brett Johnson Show. Today's episode, let's talk about account takeovers. Now, before we get to that, got a few things we got to address, a few things we got to talk about. The first, hey, voice is hitting about 90% now. I'm almost fully recovered. Yes, I'm a day late on this episode, but guess what? My voice just gave out on me yesterday. It did. I've had a couple. The thing is, I got to be honest. The thing is that, I enjoy this show. I enjoy getting on a stage because it allows me to do some therapy for myself. It allows me to open up, get some things out. I usually find out something new about myself as we're talking. All these other things. There was a person that pointed out, I think it was on the Concrete podcast, on the viewer comments, man, he sure likes listening to his own voice. Well, I guess there's probably some truth to that. I'd rather listen to my voice than whoever made that comment's voice. Let's put it like that. Just saying. Anyway, so I do these speeches. I travel all over the planet, do this podcast, do a lot of other podcasts, a lot of interviews as well. I get a lot of comments, and I started this podcast. This is actually my third podcast, and I started this one because the first one was the online broadcast, which I was kind of boxed into a little hole there where I could only talk about merchant fraud. And needless to say, I got other shit than that to discuss. So that show, it went 30 some episodes, and it's still highly regarded among fraud analysts as, hey, this is a really good show. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone that listened to that. But I got to say, I felt a little boxed in because I was always wanting to talk about cybersecurity issues, personal issues to a degree. Maybe I would go off on a tangent and mention some politics every now and then, because hey, who gives a shit about politics, right? Right. So I was always wanting to talk about more. I started the Anglerfish podcast as basically wanting to talk about my story. Brought my sister in, brought some of these FBI agents in, federal prosecutor, all these other people who helped me tell my story over about 17 different episodes. And then finally tried to turn that into an interview type format podcast, which I quickly got tired of because, hey, I wanted to talk. I like the sound of my own voice. So that didn't go very well. And then the pandemic hit, and it certainly didn't go well at that point. Now we're finally getting past the pandemic. We're facing World War III. Wholesale inflation hits 11% yesterday. The cryptocurrency markets are a bloodbath. Stock market looks like it's going to hell. Housing market, there was an article on Drudge today mentioned the housing market might be the next to pop, and God, I hope so. Because let's be honest, housing prices are insane. So I'm doing this show, the Brett Johnson Show, so I could talk about cybercrime, cybersecurity, crime in general, fraud, personal issues, politics, whatever the hell I want to bitch about. The interesting thing, the point that I was getting at is with the Anglerfish podcast, I had a lot of people that reached out to me because they had similar types of childhoods. or dysfunctional relationships or have been victims of abuse or what have you. I've always had victims of crime reach out to me. But because of the Anglerfish podcast and me opening up about my background, some of the abuse that I went through and the toxic people and stuff like that, I had a lot of people that reached out. On the Brett Johnson show, and because of Lex Fridman and these other podcasts that I've been doing where I've been opening up about these things, I've had more and more people reaching out to me. And so I wanted to talk about a message that I got just yesterday. You know, usually I talk about somebody who's bitching or a question about cybersecurity or anything else like that. But, you know, when I get a good message from somebody who's been through the shit, it really hits home with me. It really does. It really kind of solidifies that idea that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I know this show is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I truly do. You know, whether we're talking about crime or talking about relationships or overcoming obstacles or what have you, I know I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I had an individual on Twitter. He had asked a few weeks ago if I would do an episode on addiction. And I will do that. Not on drug addiction. I was never addicted to drugs. I was addicted to crime, addicted to toxic people. I'm still codependent, probably still. I don't think you ever get past those addictions. I think you learn how to cope with them. But what I will say is, and I said this, and this is what brings up the idea for this show. I said on Lex Fridman that a person who is addicted to something cannot love anything other than their addictions. That got a lot of positive feedback. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So we're going to do an episode on that in the future. Probably next week we'll do an episode on that. All right. But today it's account takeovers. I wanted to read this message from this individual before we start that show. There's two different points I want to talk about before we start the show. The first, this gentleman sent me a message on LinkedIn yesterday. The subject is, "Hey, buddy." So he says, "Hey, Brett, I just wanted to reach out and say you are doing wonderful things for many people. I found you, like many, from Lex. Been binge listening to all your podcasts and watching all your YouTube content from you. I, too, like you, as many have reached out, had a fucked up childhood. My dad has been in prison almost all my life. My mom and her boyfriend were doped out all of my life living with them. Heavy abuse most wouldn't even be able to stomach. No butthole penetration, though. But one day, Children's Services finally came through and got me and my 3 siblings out of the situation. And it was a fucked up mess until I was 17. Joined the military. Had a case of FIS, which those viewers who know what FIS is or don't know, it is fucking idiot syndrome. FIS, fucking idiot syndrome. Had a case of FIS, got locked up for 18 months, been out for 9 years, have 4 kids, wife. Enjoying my kids and wife. I appreciate you taking the time to read this, man. Love all the content you put out." As I'm reading that, I'm getting chill bumps. It's not everyone that's able to open up publicly and talk about where they fucked up, the relationships in their life, the abuse they've underwent, everything else. And it's even less people who are able to overcome those types of demons and obstacles. This gentleman, he went through it and he came through and he's got 4 kids. I mean, 4 kids, think about that. I've got 2 stepsons. One of my major regrets was never having children of my own. Major regret. I'm actually thankful that I didn't, because let's be honest, I was a criminal for decades. And I never wanted to bring up a child in that type of environment. And I was always scared that I would be basically my mother if I had children. I was always scared of that. So I never had kids, never did. Now that I've been able to, I'm turning things around. I don't say I've turned things around yet. Now that I'm turning things around, I look back And that's one of the big regrets in my life is not having children. I've got 2 outstanding stepsons. I've got 3. I only claimed 2. The third one was already in the Navy when I came into the picture. But I've got 2 outstanding stepsons, and they both think of me as a dad. I think of them as my sons. But always, I think it would have been, it'd been really nice to have had kids and been able to raise them and grow together with them. This gentleman here that reached out, I responded to him. I think he's absolutely amazing that he was able to turn his life around. He alludes to some of the abuse that he went through. I can't imagine what all that was, but he alludes to some of it, and he was able to overcome that. I hope his siblings were as well. It's very difficult to overcome that, and that's one of the reasons that I know that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. It's a culmination. Everything that I'm doing today, what I do today, is a culmination, is only because of every single person that I met throughout my entire life, every person that victimized me, every person that I victimized. I'm not proud of victimizing people. I'm not. I find no joy, no pride in that whatsoever. I think I think I was an absolutely despicable person, and I was given the opportunity to turn my life around, and I took it. It took a few attempts. I'm not the guy that got it on the first time around. It took a few attempts, but I'm very grateful for the life I've been blessed with now, for the family that I'm blessed with, for the job that I'm able to do and allowed to do these days. I'm very grateful for that. I take it very seriously, this idea of helping to protect people against the type of person that I used to be. But I also take it very seriously about talking about these issues, these personal issues, the abuse, the dysfunctional relationships, toxic people. I take that very seriously because I know there are people out there who maybe need to hear that. And not only me, but I need to get that out, because I don't think I don't think you overcome it. I think you learn to live with it and make the most out of it. We're all kind of dealt this hand, right? And we play the hand that we have to. And we play it to the best of our abilities. And I just think I'm very fortunate that I'm given the life that I'm given today. A lot of people aren't like that. And maybe by me talking about some of my issues, maybe it helps somebody out there. It seems to. I'm not trying to say I'm some sort of whatever the fuck, but it seems to help some people by me talking about it. It's a hard trip. Jesus, it's a hard trip. It is. It's a job every single day. Every single day. I'm still learning what a healthy relationship is. I still learn to try to open up, to share things. It's very hard for me to trust the people that are closest to me. This gentleman here, hey, I think you're outstanding. I do. I think you're absolutely outstanding. Congratulations on the kids, the wife, the job that you told me in the follow-up message. Congratulations on all of that. I've got a lot of respect for you. Thank you for listening to the show. I appreciate that. I say this and I mean this. I mean, people who connect with me on LinkedIn know that. People who are on Twitter now follow me. They're starting to find that out. Hey, you may have to chase me around a little bit every now and then, but I'll help you. If you need something, I'll do everything that I can. Sometimes I get sidetracked and everything, but send me some messages. Okay, I'll do everything I can to help you guys any possible way I can. I don't know what that'd be, but I certainly will. All right, so that's the first thing that I wanted to address. The next thing, a guy on Twitter, Brett Johnson, idiot that he is sometimes. I commented on the crypto bloodbath. And of course, as soon as I mentioned the word Coinbase, the bots come in and just start flooding the tweet that I had sent out with scam messages. Well, this one guy responds, and he was asking me about crypto and my advice for investing in crypto. I want to be completely clear. I don't know a damn thing about cryptocurrencies. Not a damn thing. You know what? I take Steve Wozniak, the Apple co-founder that Steve Jobs kind of screwed over. Steve Wozniak, he did a podcast with Steve-O. You remember Jackass, the show? He did a podcast with Steve-O. And the man, I tell you, I love Steve Wozniak. Who would have thought Steve O could have had a nice conversation like that? But evidently, the podcast is outstanding as well. So I did I was listening to that, and Wozniak makes a few comments that I think are really, really apropos when we're talking about cryptocurrency. He says Bitcoin is safe because it's the big elephant on the block. Yeah. He actually goes on, he starts talking about how really it's only Bitcoin. I kind of believe that. I mean, Bitcoin is the big kid on the block. I don't think that Bitcoin ultimately is going anywhere. I think the other coins that are tokens, or whatever you want to call them, I think the other tokens, coins, currencies, whatever you want to call them, like Monero, I think Monero has a purpose, a use case, laundering money, illegal transactions. I think that kind of shit. These other things, though, man, I kind of doubt how, some of these other tokens. I do. And again, hey, my opinion, I ain't got a dog in the fight, a race, anything else. I just don't understand the use case of 95% of these tokens. And if they don't have a use case, why are you investing in them? Okay, now that doesn't mean not to invest in, because let's be honest, this is a hype-driven market. Hype, pure hype. The reason Shiba Inu goes through the fucking roof isn't because you got Bone and all these other tokens associated with it. It's because it's hype-driven. And there was a lot of hype, and a lot of people made a boatload of money on it. So if you can get on that hype train, by all means. But you got to be able to get off that hype train, before it crashes down. We had Luna crashed this week, went from like $81 a token down to, I think, 19 cents, something like that. The Terra coin that was associated with it, the quote unquote stable coin, crashed through the floor as well. So it's really a hype driven market. What I would say is, if you're getting your investment advice from Reddit, you are not an investor, you are a gambler. These NFTs, I think the technology is outstanding. I think that JPEGs are bullshit. Okay? I truly do. I think, is there money to be made? Yeah, there's money to be made, but it's all hype driven. It's all hype driven until you get to a token like Bitcoin and Monero that actually have use cases. It's hype driven. Baby Doge coin, which I own a few of those, has sunk through the floor recently. No, I mean, wonder why. Now, how in the hell can a coin save dogs? Well, it can't. All right, you don't have to have a coin to do that. So my advice is, and again, I don't know a damn thing about crypto except, its origins. It's got its origins in things like eGold and Liberty Reserve, which were criminal tokens that were helped to use money laundering. Bitcoin starts out the exact same way. Yes, Bitcoin was around before criminals adopted it, but guess what? It got its use case from Silk Road for helping to launder money and engage in criminal activities. And we still see that use case today. That's a very viable use case. Monero, it's a very viable use case to be able to launder money anonymously. So it's very viable. I would say do your research. Don't get investment advice from Reddit. Understand that Reddit's got bots in there. Reddit's got people, shills in there, everything else. Same thing for Discord, same thing for Telegram. If you're on these channels, you're in an echo chamber. That's the only thing you're in. You're in an echo chamber. You've got all these things that are programmed, or people that are sitting there to shill to get you to buy more. Or, you got the token crashing and you hear buy more. It's a good buying opportunity. No, by God, when it's down 90%, is Luna a good buying opportunity? No, it's friggin' not. It's not. Act like you would a stock. And that's one of the big things that we're seeing these days, especially in the United States. We're seeing that the language of crypto changing, right? It used to be called a currency. Now you're seeing this big shift where, well, I've got a share in it. You're seeing it being talked about more as a stock. Well, you know what? When you don't even know what the hell it is, that becomes a problem all of a sudden. I would say do your research. I'd say there's money to be made in it, but I would say do your research. Don't rely on me to tell you. Don't rely on anyone on Reddit to tell you. or Discord or Telegram or anything else. Find some viable outlets, respectable outlets that will educate you on this sector. All right. And you see these people that they try to put stock market technical analysis to these tokens and things like that. That's all bunk. It's all bunk. It may be appropriate to talk about stocks like that, but crypto is a different type of animal. All right. That's all I've got to say about that. I can't give investment advice because I don't know a damn thing about it. Okay. I would just say, please do your research. I can talk all day about the scams though, all day. Crypto is wide open for scams. It is wide open for that. All right. You can take over Twitter accounts. You can set up Discords. You can set up Telegrams. You can set up Reddit subreddits that are sit there only to get people to invest in a token that is absolutely worthless, meaningless, has no case or use case whatsoever. It's only there for the person who's created the token to make money. Sometimes these tokens go through the roof. Sometimes they go through the roof, and a lot of people make a lot of money. More often than not, these tokens crash through the floor, and the only person who makes money is the person who has created the token. So please do your research. Find a viable use case. Why does that token exist? Why are you buying JPEGs? Okay. If you're buying it because it's going through the roof and it's hype-based, sure, engage in that. Understand that it's hype-based, and as soon as the hype dies, it dies. So you got to get out. Okay. All right. So moving right along. That's all I was going to say about that. Like I said, my voice is about 90% today. I've got Justin Pierce is going to come in, and we're going to do an episode on solar winds, because the guy, he knows his stuff when he's talking about solar winds. It looks like he knows his stuff on a lot of different areas. So he's going to probably be a recurring guest. But he's going to come in next week. We're going to do an episode on solar winds. I've kept delaying the gentleman because my voice has been screwed up or I've been traveling. But we're going to get him in. We're going to do an episode on solar winds because we need to talk about that. We really need to talk about that because it seems most of the media is not. I don't know if it's being swept under the rug, whatever, because it's so frightening, but no one's talking about that right now. So we're going to talk about that. Just waiting until my voice gets back up. I think we're going to record that. Today's Friday. We're going to record that probably tomorrow to get that out. All right. So we're talking about account takeovers today. Finally, Brett, you're getting to the topic of the show. Yeah, I know I'm getting to the topic of the show. So ATOs, account takeovers. I guess the way to start this is to first let everyone know that your information is available. Okay? Your information is available. I don't care who you are. I don't care how rich you are, how poor you are, how educated, how uneducated, how much security you got in place, how much security you don't got in place. Your information is available. I'm often asked when I give a presentation, Brett, what can I do to make sure that a criminal can't get my information? Well, that's not the way to think about it. Your information is readily available. I can go on robocheck.cm. Criminal database lists the social security numbers and dates of birth for roughly 170 million Americans. I can buy your information. I think it's $3.80 right now. I can buy your social, your date of birth for that. So from there, I go over to I use legal services. Let's backtrack. So in the United States today, everything is kind of based on this thing called KBA, knowledge-based authentication. Those are the security questions which are asked when you set up an account or when you change information on an existing account, when you go to pull your credit profile, your credit report, things like that. That's KBA, knowledge-based authentication. Those questions tend to come from credit bureaus and open source intelligence that's scraped from the web regarding you. All right. So in order to take over an account, I need the answers to those questions. I need your complete identity profile. So where do I get that? Well, I usually start, there's a few places I can get it. It's readily available. The idea that you may have that there's something to do to make sure your information is not released, already been released. I mean, last year alone, we had 2,564 reported breaches. The number of records compromised, over 100 billion records compromised just last year. Your information is available. Now, I need you to accept that. If you can accept that, then you can ask the next question. Well, Brett, since my information is available, What can I do to make sure a criminal can't use it if they get it? Now, that question we can answer, and we will at the end of this show. So your information is out there. So what happens is, if I'm taking over an account, I need to answer those security questions. I have to have a complete identity profile. Criminals call it a FULZ, F-U-L-L-Z. All right. And a complete profile consists of name, address, social, date of birth, mother's maiden, driver's license number, background check, credit report, any type of social media lookups which might be of interest. Okay. Now I can buy that ready-made off dark web marketplaces, off Facebook groups, places like that. Ready-made, they run anywhere from $30 up to about $130, depending on credit score, location of victim, gender of victim. Okay, ready-made. Now, children, you can get children's identities too. Children's identities used to be the children's FULZ, which a FULZ for a kid is the child's name, social, date of birth, mother's maiden, place of birth. Now, that used to, 3 years ago, you could get that shit for $2.08 per profile. These days, children's profiles run about $20 to $25, and that's specifically because of synthetic identity fraud, which we're going to do a show about that in the extremely near future. Probably not this next week, week after. As next week is solar winds, and then I'm going to do that show on addiction that I just talked about in the pre-run up to our subject today. So where can I get the information? I can buy it ready-made. Those profiles are ready-made by criminals. I can buy it ready-made, or if it's not ready-made, and oftentimes it's not. So, if I'm looking to take over a PayPal account or your bank account or anything else like that, I'll go to the dark web. I'll buy the login credentials. I'll get some sort of PII. So if I'm looking to take over, your PayPal account, maybe I spend $40 for your login credentials and some PII. I'm guaranteed that the account has so much money in it, or it's got a card attached to it, or a bank account attached to it, or what have you. So I can spend $40 for that. Then I have to, if it's a bank account, I have to pull the complete FULZ. So I have to build that from the ground up. Now, how do you build that? Well, sometimes I have access to DelvePoint or TLO. TLO and DelvePoint are both skip tracing software. It delivers the complete background check of that individual. Oftentimes includes driver's license scans, socials, all these, just a complete background check. Those are outstanding if a criminal has access to it. And criminals often do have access to those things. Runs about $20, $25 per lookup. If, however, there's not a dark web vendor that's selling that bullshit at the time, that means I have to build this FULZ manually. So what do? I mentioned it a few minutes ago. I start by going to someplace like robocheck.cm. Criminal database lists the social security numbers of about 170 million Americans, social security numbers, dates of birth. I buy your social, your date of birth there for $3.80. Now, I've got that. From there, I go and get your background check. Where do I go? Well, I start to use legal services like Ben Verified, Spokeo, Intellius, White Pages Pro, People, things like that. For example, Ben Verified lets me look up unlimited background checks for, I think, $27 a month right now. I can look up however many background checks I want to. So I pull your background check, every single associates of yours, in the hopes of getting your mother's maiden name, which I'll get. From there, I get the credit report. Where do I go? Well, I go to the exact same place you go, annualcreditreport.com. Why? Well, they ask security questions there, but there's no time limit on the security questions, meaning I can literally sit there all day long with the background checks with Google, try to get the correct answers. If I miss it, if I miss some of the questions and don't get the credit report there, am I worried? No, I'm not, because my next stop is Credit Karma, where they ask the exact same questions, except the correct answer is different. So now I've got your credit report. Go to LinkedIn to find out where you work. Glassdoor to find out how much you make. Finally, I pay a visit over to Facebook to find out if you've posted anything of interest. And that is your ass. I can do whatever I want to you at that point in time. Take over accounts, set up new accounts, any type of, HELOC loan, student loan fraud, stimulus fraud, whatever I want to do, I can do it at that point. So that's how criminals build FULZ. All right. Now you're back. I've mentioned before on a podcast that 80% of everyone on the planet uses the same or similar passwords across multiple websites. You can go to Pastebin and you can find for free these databases that list it's just raw password dumps that criminals have got and they put on Pastebin. You can find that kind of stuff. So you can get someone's password. Oftentimes people don't change the password, or oftentimes the password is just slightly modified. And so that's what happens there. So it's very easy to get your information. And I need that information if I'm going to take over an account. And when I'm talking about taking over an account, when I was a cyber criminal, the only real accounts that we were interested in taking over were your credit card accounts and your bank accounts. Because that's where the money was. These days, every single account has value. Your email's got value, your bank, your credit card, your tax statements, your tax login software, your credit reports, your credit cards, your merchant accounts. Every single login that you've got has value. Now, not every single one of those logins or accounts that I may be trying to take over, and it depends on what type of criminal I am as to what type of account that I'm going to try to take over. Not every single one of those requires me to have a complete identity profile in order to take it over. For example, if I'm trying to take over your food delivery service, whether it be Uber Eats or whatever that Dash Door, whatever the hell that other stuff is, if I'm trying to take that over, I don't need a complete identity profile to take over those accounts like that. I don't need a complete identity profile to take over your streaming service or your gaming service subscription. I don't need complete identity profiles on that. So it depends on what I'm trying to take over as to what type of tools that I will need in order to take over that account. The reason I mentioned the complete identity profiles is because I'm talking about bank accounts, talking about credit accounts, things like that. But if it's merchant accounts, things like that, think of it as an idea of trust. All right. In order for me to take over an account, I need to get that potential victim, the merchant, the bank, the credit report agency, the credit card company, the email company. I need to get that potential victim to trust me in order to give me access to that account. So what do I need to get that potential victim to trust me? Now, we did an episode on this in the past. You see, all this shit builds one on top of another. How does a criminal establish trust with a potential victim? Through a combination of technology, tools, and social engineering. Technology, your cell phones, your laptops, your desktop computers. We inherently trust the technology which is given to us. A lot of time we don't understand it, but we still trust it. What we don't understand is that criminals use a variety of tools to manipulate that technology. They use spoofed phone numbers. They use SOC 5 proxies. They use RDPs. They use spoofed browser fingerprints. They use captured cookies. They use a variety of tools to manipulate that technology to establish trust. And then depending on the type of account that's being taken over, that's when social engineering kicks in. We see how good of a con man, liar, social engineer that criminal is in manipulating you in order to give up information, access, data, or cash. Now, if it's an email account, if it's a merchant account, I don't need to worry about a lot of the times I don't need to worry about a whole lot of social engineering. I can typically come in with credentials, just credentials and a brand new device and log in. A lot of times that will work. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes I may need to use a spoofed browser fingerprint. So a lot of times when I go out on the dark web, if I'm buying credentials to take over your account, sometimes those credentials will include your browser fingerprint. See, when you visit a website, that website captures roughly 42 unique characteristics about the device and that session of what goes on. And those unique characteristics are enough to identify you potentially against millions of different users on that same website, that same platform. Now, typically, only about 11 of those characteristics are looked at. So when you go on the dark web, sometimes you buy someone's credit card information, their login, their details, or their bank account login, or their PayPal or FinTech login, or what have you. Sometimes it will come with that browser fingerprint, those 11 little different unique characteristics that you need to spoof in order to come in and take over the account. So that's, again, this is a tool that a criminal uses in order to manipulate the technology in order to gain enough trust to come in and take over the account. So that's what works with things like, Uber accounts. It works with some of the fintech services, merchant accounts. It works with all these different things. So think of it like that. What does a criminal need to do in order to establish trust with that potential victim, in this case, a company, email, credit report, what have you, bank, credit card company, tax statements? What does he need to do to establish enough trust to gain access to take over that account? Sometimes it's not a lot. Sometimes it's just the credentials, your login and password. Sometimes it may require a spoofed browser fingerprint, a spoofed a proxy address. For those who may not know, a proxy address, your physical box, your computer may be located, or your device may be located, like I am in Birmingham, Alabama. A proxy allows me to make it appear that I am in Miami, California, New York, South America, the EU, the UK, Canada, where have you. So I may have to use a tool like that to make it appear that I am somewhere where I am not, which helps to establish trust when I'm trying to take over an account. Some accounts require KBA, knowledge-based authentication, those security questions. That's why I mentioned AFULS when I started out. So I'm talking about bank accounts, credit card companies. There are other accounts that require that as well. For example, if I'm a real asshole and I'm trying to take over a senior citizen's Social Security account, divert those payments from the bank account that they're having it deposited into over to a prepaid debit card that I've got, that requires KBA. I have to have that victim's complete identity profile. And I just went through how to build that. So how does an account takeover take place? So if I'm taking over your bank account, I'll go on the dark web. I'll buy those credentials. I'll get the login, the password, maybe some of your PII, maybe even some account details as well. Okay. Sometimes I'll have the browser fingerprint, sometimes not. Now that depends on who I'm buying it from and how that data is being stolen that I'm buying. Okay. And I'm going to get into that in just a minute or two. Historically, the way it's worked is I would go and I'd buy those login credentials, $40, $50, and oftentimes the price will depend on the available balance on the account. For example, if I'm going to take over one of the big bank accounts like Chase, Wells, Bank of America, whatsoever, I will tend to pay according to how much information I'm purchasing. If it's just login details, typically I can get that for $50. All right, then I have to build everything out from there. If it's browser fingerprint, maybe the cookie attached to it as well, maybe, like I said, browser fingerprint, maybe some PII attached to it, and a guaranteed available balance, and everything is turned on in that bank account. So Zelle's turned on, ACH is easy enough to do, bill pay is turned on, all these other things. Then I'll pay a percent of however much available balance is on that account. So some of these bank accounts may cost me $300 to $400 or more sometimes, okay? So from there, what I would typically do is I'd go to the bank, I'd recon the bank. I'm looking for what type of security the bank has. I'm going to read the terms of service. I don't know if I've said this before or not, but it seems to me that the only people who read terms of service on a website are criminals and attorneys. And is there a difference? Probably not. So I'll read the terms of service because oftentimes the terms of service will divulge some of the security they've got in place. If I'm really interested, maybe I'll set up an account at that bank myself under my own name so I see what the process is. And I'll even try to take over my own account just to see what type of security pops up, things like that. I'll go to the criminal communities and I'll pull up whatever information is about that specific bank. What are they talking about? Are they talking about the security products that are being used? Is anybody hitting this bank? What success have they had? What tools are they using to hit the bank? What do I need to do? What advice Do the professionals there, even though I may be a professional myself, I'll still reach out to see what type of chatter is going on. So I'll hit Telegram, I'll hit the dark web dread, I'll see what kind of things are being sold on the marketplace for the bank, all these other things. I'll ask my associates and depend on that because there's a lot of information to be had there. From there, I need to know if they've got multi-factor authentication. If they do, how is the multi-factor authentication deployed? Is it deployed by email? If it is, it's crap. All right, because I already know that 80% of everyone uses the same password across multiple websites. I know that phishing, so 92% of every single breach begins with a phishing attack. How successful is phishing? Spear phishing, if I'm targeting you specifically, spear phishing is about 86% effective. I don't care how much cybersecurity awareness training you've got. I don't care how rich, how poor, how educated, how uneducated you are. It's still about 86% effective. So I'll send out a spear phishing email, get your login credentials for your email, and I'll be able to intercept that MFA message that's coming through by email. If it's coming through over your phone, am I worried about it? Maybe not. Maybe not. There's all kinds of little social engineering tricks that I can use to trick you into giving me the code that comes across on your email, or I can do a SIM swap, a phone port. I can have your phone that's in your pocket shut down, and instead it's sent over to a prepaid device that I've picked up over at Walmart, and you don't know about it. So it gives me those credentials. So MFA is not bad to get past. Even better, there's a new marketplace called Genesis Marketplace, which is a bot marketplace. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. But it's a bot marketplace, which is very effective sometimes at bypassing MFA that people have engaged. And I'll talk about how in just a few minutes. So I'm not horribly worried about MFA. The way it used to work is I would simply pick up the phone. So if I buy those login credentials and I don't have the browser fingerprint, I don't have the cookie, I'm worried about, a brand new device signing in that it's going to flag the account and everything else. How do I bypass that? Well, typically I'll just pick up the phone. I've already got your complete identity profile. I'll pick up the phone. I'll spoof your phone number. That way when excuse me, my nose is itching. So I'll spoof your phone number and I'll call into bank's customer service. That way they don't see the phone number that I'm calling from. They see the phone number that's on file with the bank. Remember, trust, technology, tools, social engineering. Those customer service reps, they trust the technology which is in front of them, that screen. They don't understand that I'm using a tool, a spoofed phone number to manipulate that technology. That way they see your phone number calling in. They're already trusting right out of the gate that it's the person who it's supposed to be. Now I'm going to call in. I'm going to ask one question. That one question is, what is my available balance on file? They're going to ask me two security questions. The voice is giving out. They're going to ask me two security questions. One of those questions, more than likely, mother's maiden name. Now, I have the mother's maiden name, but I'm going to miss it on purpose. I'm going to say any other name, but I'm going to say it with confidence. So I'll say Johnson. Well, I'm sorry, sir. That's not the number we've got on file. Huh? Well, what number do you have on file? Sorry, sir. We're not going to tell you the number we got on file. Well, look, I don't know what you guys are doing over there, but I know what my mom's name is. What the hell? Now, what happens at that point? They're trained to ask two more security questions, which I have the answers to. I answer those correctly, then what happens? Then they change the mother's maiden name to whatever I want them to change the mother's maiden name to. They give me the available balance. Now, is that the purpose of the call? No, that is not the purpose of the call. The purpose of the call happens as that customer service agent goes to hang up. As they go to hang up, I come in and say, oh, by the way, can you update my phone number on file? Why, yes, sir, we can do that. Now, why do I do it like that? Remember, technology, tools, social engineering. I'm spoofing a phone number using a tool to manipulate the technology in front of the customer service rep. That way they believe it's the actual account holder that's calling in. That lays a base level of trust. Now, the idea, in order for me to take over the account, I need to control the phone number. That's the only thing I need to control, because if there's any problems, what do? They call the number on file, your phone number, which I don't have access to. So I need to update the phone number to a phone number that I control. Now, if I were to just spoof a phone number, call into customer service and immediately say, hey, can you update my phone number on file, even though it's showing the correct phone number, I've not established enough trust for customer service to do that. They're probably going to boot me up to higher security, more verification. I'm trying to avoid that. I know that customer service can do that because they tend to have a lot of power. So I want them to take care of it. So how do I get them to take care of it? I create a diversion, I cause a problem, we solve the problem, I verify even more who I am, and then distract them the entire way while building and establishing more trust. So I miss the mother's maiden name, creating a problem and a diversion. But don't worry, we're going to solve this problem together by answering more KBA, more knowledge-based authentication questions. We're going to solve this issue together. And I'm going to establish more trust with you by proving even more by answering these questions that I am who I claim I am. That's going to distract you. Now, I know that you're answering maybe 200 to 300 calls a day. I know that your position is to make me happy, to satisfy me as a customer, to make things frictionless. So I know that since you're going through 300 calls a day, I get you distracted. I layer more trust on top of that. I know that you're already looking forward to, once that problem is solved, you change the mother's maiden name, you give me the available balance. I know at that point that you're mentally disengaged from my call because the issue's been solved. You're already looking forward to the next call. It's at that point that I come in and say, oh, by the way, can you update the phone number that's on file? Yes, we can. Now, how effective is that? That is literally the way that I used to take over your bank account. It's so effective that I have been asked by customer service, why are you changing the phone number on file? And my answer has been, I no longer have that number. I no longer have the number that's literally on the screen in front of the customer service rep. That's how account takeovers used to work, all right, on banks, on credit cards. These days, it's really not much different than that. You recon, you gain information, you pick out whichever tools that you need to take over the account that you need to take over, and then you go in and take it over. Sometimes it may mean, engaging in a phone call. Depending on the type of account, you don't have to use the phone. You can simply use credentials, browser fingerprints, cookies, things like that. Now, I mentioned before, there's a marketplace called Genesis. Genesis is changing the way that account takeovers are taking place. It truly is. Genesis, I'm going to pull this up. I was not going to show the website, but I'm going to pull this up. Share screen real quick. Let's see. Share screen, Brady. All right, share screen. So what we're looking at here, this is Genesis Marketplace. Genesis Marketplace lists over 400,000 bots. These bots range anywhere from $3.75 up to about $400 a pop. The bots sit on someone's network, and as that person visits a target website, say Chase, say Bank of America, Truist, one of the fintech services, your Sony login, your Xbox login, whatever, as it visits that, Genesis captures the cookie, the browser fingerprint, the login credentials, the credit card numbers. It captures every single thing that a criminal would need in order to take over that account. So this is what it looks like. You can click on one of the links here, and it will actually tell you, or you can search. If you're searching for a specific target, it will tell you what is available. So this right here is what one of the bots looks like. And so you got Adobe being delivered, you got Apple information being delivered on this one. So there's not a whole lot of information on that specific bot. Let's back up here just a second so we can talk about this stuff. Oh yeah, so this bot has Twitter information, Hostgator, Care4, whatever that is, Google, Pinterest, Yahoo, Shopify, Facebook, Authorize, all this. And that bot was selling for $59. You got another one here for $8 that's delivering things from Ranch System, from a bunch of crap that I have no idea what the hell that is. You got another one for Adobe that's being sold for $7. So that's what happens. You can buy these bots. The bot delivers these credentials to you that you can then use to take over that specific account. Now, I've said before, I'll say again, most cyber criminals are not sophisticated. Most cyber criminals don't have a clue on what to do with a cookie if they had it. Genesis also solves that problem by having its own standalone browser or browser plugin, which automates a lot of that for you. So Genesis is actually changing the way that a lot of account takeovers take place. And I mentioned multi-factor authentication again. So imagine this. So the question is going to come, well, how do these bots get deployed? I've mentioned this statistic before. 90% of every single attack uses known exploits. It's not the stuff we don't know about. It's not zero-day attacks. It's typically the stuff we do know about that we've been told about for years that causes the problem. That's an example of this. 80% of all passwords, the same. All right. I mean, the same people use the same passwords, 80% of them across multiple websites. 41% of every single router has the default password. And that doesn't even mention the billions of IoT devices with the default password. And sometimes you can't even change the password on IoT devices. So that creates a threat landscape where bots can come out and sit on networks and capture this stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people out there. 41% of people have never changed the default password on their router. That's banks. That's individuals. 41%. So that creates this threat landscape where you have bots that can come in and sit on that. So think about it like this. So you have a bot on your system. You go in to sign into your bank account. You have multi-factor authentication deployed. Now, when you sign in, multi-factor, you get that SMS, you get that email that's sent over. Now, as the bot sits there, it captures the cookie, it captures the fingerprint, it captures the credentials, it captures everything it needs to take over your account. Now, you leave the session of your bank account. Criminal comes in right behind you. Guess what happens? It bypasses multi-factor authentication in a lot of those cases. Bypasses that because you've already passed MFA. I'm using the exact same tokens coming right back in. It bypasses MFA, so I don't have to worry about MFA at that point. Now, am I seeing that right now? You're damn right I'm seeing that. I'm actually dealing with victims of bank takeovers right now where this type of system has been deployed. Criminal comes in right after the actual account holder comes in, sends out Zelle payments, sends out ACHs. Guess what? The bank doesn't realize that it's an account takeover, and the bank thinks it's the actual individual that's sending out those funds, meaning that you're not covered with fraud protection. I'm actually dealing with 2 victims right now where the bank has told them basically to get screwed. You're the one that sent it out when it's obvious that they're not. But the bank is fighting that because it looks like the real individual coming in. These types of marketplaces where you've got Genesis, you've got Russia House, you've got a few other marketplaces that are copying the Genesis model. Genesis has been out for well over a year, but these type of marketplaces are changing the way that account takeovers take place. They're changing the success rate of it. It used to be, like I said, I'd go on the dark web, I'd buy account credentials to take over your account. I wouldn't get the cookie. Oftentimes I wouldn't get the browser fingerprint. I wouldn't have the correct IP range or anything else like that. So I'd have to worry about IP range. I'd have to worry about the cookie, the fingerprint. There are all these different areas where that potential account takeover would fail. That's one of the reasons that a lot of criminals would oftentimes result of picking up the phone. You don't have to worry about an IP or a device coming in if you're simply picking up the phone to take over an account. Bypasses a whole shitload of that stuff. So Genesis really solves a lot of that. It delivers the cookie, it delivers the browser fingerprint, it delivers the credentials, delivers the credit card numbers, delivers everything you need in order to take it over. Sometimes you do have to worry about IPs, which is a problem, knowing that LuxSox, which was the premier provider of proxy addresses, SOX 5 proxies. Turns out the LuxSox, I guess they kind of cashed in a couple months ago. They decided they were going to I don't know if they got shut down or not, but they announced their withdrawal from the proxy provider industry. And they had been really one of the go-to services for SOX 5 proxies for criminals. No longer there. So criminals right now are you see on Telegram, there's always talk now, who's a good proxy provider, who's good right now. And it's hard to find a good one right now. But that's account takeovers. So how do you protect yourself from stuff like this? How do you protect yourself? Those stats come to mind. 90% of every single attack uses known exploits. So you need to pay attention to somebody like me or some cybersecurity person out there or somebody that's talking about cybercrime when they give you advice. Are you changing the default passwords on your router, on your IoT devices, on your printer? Are you changing these things? Do you have credit freezes in place? I talk about all the time. If you don't do anything else, at the end of the day, freeze the credit on every single person in the house, including your children. Children are the number one victims of identity theft. 25%, 1 in 4, will be a victim of ID theft. That's synthetic fraud, that's tax fraud, that's medical fraud. So freeze the credit of every single person in the house. Credit freezes became free September 18th, 2018. Okay, you have to contact all 3 credit bureaus. They're going to try to talk you into putting some sort of credit monitoring or alert process in place. Screw that. Tell them you want a credit freeze. They're free and they work great for stopping new account fraud. We as adults, it works great for kids. We as adults, we have existing accounts, meaning that you got to monitor and place alerts on those existing accounts. That's email, that's credit reports, that's your tax statements, that's your merchant logins, that's your bank, that's your credit cards. You need to monitor those accounts, place alerts on those accounts where you can. For example, Discover Card has a $0 alert, meaning that if I go on the dark web and buy your Discover Card details for, say, $12, which is what they sell them for, say I buy your Discover Card details for $12. I ping the card just to see if it's alive. You get a text message saying, hey, somebody's trying to take over your credit card or try to use your credit card to buy a laptop. You get that text message and you can have the card shut down before anything happens. So credit freeze, monitor accounts, place alerts, and then that statistic that 80% of the population uses the same password or similar passwords across multiple websites. You've got to stop that. You've got to use secure different passwords. Now, we as human beings, we lack the capacity to be random. On top of that, we are never taught on how to choose a secure password. We're told to go to a website. It's got a login thing there, and it says week, and we start inputting stuff, and finally we put enough stuff in, uppercase, lowercase, throw so many symbols. And finally it says strong, and we're like, shit, yeah, it's strong. No idea what makes it strong at all. And it varies from website to website. A password manager takes care of that for you. See, the problem is with this 80% statistic, the problem is this thing called credential stuffing. Because I may send out an email that looks like it comes from your financial institution. Your level of awareness is high enough that you're like, oh, I'm not going to fall for that shit. You realize it's a phishing email. But if I send out an email that looks like it comes from Hulu, your level of awareness is not that high. No one watches Hulu. All right. Sorry, they don't. I mean, I've got Hulu, but fuck, the only thing they got's A Handmaid's Tale. That second season sucked. But if you're in that 80% that uses the same password or a similar one across multiple websites, it's an automated program. I go to sleep at night, plug those credentials in as I'm sleeping, dreaming of the money I'm about to steal. That automated program tries to log into tens of thousands of different sites overnight. I wake up the next day, I've got access to your emails, got access to your bank account, your credit card, and your Hulu statements. So a password manager tends to solve a lot of those issues for you. Don't care what password manager you use, just use one of them. It generates the passwords, it logs in for you at most, and sometimes you don't even have to do that. At most, you have to remember one main key password, master password. All right, so those are the 3 big takeaways. The bots, You've got to be able to come in, change those passwords, be aware of have that situational awareness online. Where are you visiting? What devices are you using to visit those places? Be aware of that. Have multi-factor. Yes, it can be bypassed sometimes, but have it deployed because it's an extra step that a criminal has to take in order to victimize you. All right? Think of security like that. Think of security as, what does it take for a criminal to gain trust with you or with a company or a website that you use in order to victimize that website, that company, or you? Think of it like that. Remember your place in the cybercrime spectrum, because you have one. The way a criminal will attack you depends on who you are and what you do. Always figure out who you are, what you do, and what a criminal is looking at from you. Design security around that. I am Brett Johnson, former United States most wanted cybercriminal. Not a proud title to have, but, I've been turning things around. I'm Chief Criminal Officer for Arcos Labs now. Spokesperson, ambassador, if you will, for AARP. I get to speak across the planet. I know what the hell I'm talking about when I talk about this stuff, so please pay attention. If you guys need anything, do not hesitate to reach out in the comment section. Do not hesitate to send me an email, hook up with me on LinkedIn, whatsoever. I'm Brett Johnson. What do we say? We say stay safe, stay secure, and stay vigilant. More than that, at the end of the day, this is the Brett Johnson Show. Just do the right damn thing. I am Brett Johnson. Thank you for listening. Until next time.